anything. Good evening. I don't want to move that and mess you up. My name is Susan Sarles, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Amos Fortune Forum. Back in 1946, friends chatting in the parsonage kitchen down the road came up with the idea of these weekly talks. And 78 seasons later, the forum is still a free exchange of ideas. So being here together is really the heart of the forum, but we are recording tonight's presentation, and in a few days it will be available on our YouTube channel, so please encourage your friends to watch. The forum is made possible by many volunteers and community supporters. So tonight I want to make sure to thank Alan Widmer for hosting the speakers dinner. Bob Shulman for sponsoring the floral arrangement, which, as always, was created to represent the evening's theme by Bonnie at Call's Garden Center. And special thanks to our corporate sponsors and individual donors. If you would like to contribute, and haven't this year, you may drop a donation in one of our traditional begging bowls at the door after the presentation. As always, we appreciate your support. Now, I know we have a number of members of the forum committee here tonight. If you wouldn't mind just waving your hand, they're all out back busy or something. The forum committee has members from 4 towns in the region, both full-time and part-time residents, and even one person who zooms in from California. So I share that to let you know that you too could be part of this venerable organization, and we'd love to have more people involved with us. So if you're interested in volunteering in any capacity or have ideas for us, you can fill out the card on the seats, you can speak to a committee member, or visit our website. After the presentation, there is a reception in the parish hall of the First Church of Jaffrey. It's just a few steps across the parking lot, and the way there will be lit by lanterns. So we're grateful to Betsy Trimble for coordinating the reception, and along with her hosts tonight, Diane Temple and Kat Oliver. They have prepared some tasty nibbles, I'm sure, so please don't leave them with full platters. Do pop in. It's always interesting to chat with other attendees and interact more informally with our speaker. And now, what we're here for tonight, how to begin introducing Tricia Rose Burt. When our committee was brainstorming names of potential speakers who could offer creativity, passion for the arts, and dynamic storytelling, Tricia's name came to mind immediately. From a fine Southern upbringing to roles in top business institutions to art school, Tricia has continually forged her own unique pathway through life. Her current titles include visual artist, storyteller, coach, speaker, educator, producer, and podcast host. And I'm sure that list is not all-inclusive. So sharing her story of conformity to courage, this is no time to be timid, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tricia Rose Burt.
I am indeed Tricia Rose Burt, and I'm excited to be with you this evening, and I'm honored to be a part of this great Amos Fortune Forum tradition. And before I get started, I mean, how about these flowers? Honest to goodness. I mean, you know, it's talking about me going from corporate to an artist. She even has a pair of pumps in the, I mean, it's really wonderful. So I shout out to Bonnie for such a great floral arrangement. So we're going to talk about courage and creativity in my podcast, No Time to Be Timid. And we're actually recording this evening so we can use it as a special bonus episode of the podcast. Now, if you're a listener, you know that at the start of each of my episodes, I ask my guests to say, "Hi, I'm Vince Gill, and I'm a songwriter, and this is No Time to Be Timid." Or, "Hi, I'm Laura Wilson, photographer and member of the Cowgirl Hall of Fame, and this is No Time to Be Timid." And so tonight, I'm going to say, "I'm Tricia Rose Burt. I'm speaking at the Amos Fortune Forum in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, and my audience wants you to know," and then at that point, you're going to say, "This is no time to be timid." Okay, I promise that this is the only audience participation we'll have all night long. It's the only thing you have to, so we're going to try it, see if we can get it done the first time. Okay, let's see, here we go. Hey there, I'm Tricia Rose Burt. I'm speaking at the Amos Fortune Forum in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, and my audience wants you to know that this is no time to be timid. Oh my gosh, Adam Arnone, my producer's in the crowd. Do we get it? Do we need to do it again? Are we good?
They nailed it.
We are so good. This is amazing. Give you all right. So if you've never been on a podcast before, congratulations. You're going to be on one probably in September. So there you go. Okay, so it's 1989, and I'm about 29 years old, and I'm working for one of New York's top PR firms as a senior account executive. I'm in my office at Rockefeller Center. I'm wearing pearls and sensible pumps. And I have a small window that overlooks Midtown Manhattan that makes me feel, kind of important. And I'm on the phone with the director of marketing of Z100, which is the largest radio station in New York at the time. And I'm prattling on about this promotional idea for one of my clients. And the marketing director stops me and says, "Tricia, I'm not remotely interested in this promotion, but you have an amazing voice for radio. If you come down to the station, I'll do a demo reel for you for free. You need to be on the radio." And I said, "No, thank you." I said no thank you to a powerful radio executive who believed in my abilities enough, just by hearing my voice and without even knowing me, offered to do a demo reel for me for free. It's been about 35 years, and I promise you not a year goes by that I still don't wonder what would have happened if I'd had the courage to say yes to that offer. But I wasn't raised to be courageous, at least by doing something new. I was raised to conform, because the goal was security and stability. And I was told that I would find that security and stability by conforming to my family and society's codes of behavior. There was this unspoken declaration of conformity that I was expected to follow. And here's what it looked like. There's a lot to take in. You don't have to read all of this, but some of the highlights are, and you might actually respond to some of those boxes that are up there. Some of the highlights are: I should be in business, I should obey the rules, and I should not draw attention to myself, which obviously didn't pan out. But another way to say that is that I was not supposed to take up space. So I think you're getting the gist of the whole chart, so let's just go straight to the bottom, which is, if I said yes to conformity, this is what I truly believed, that if I said yes to conformity, I could count on approval, community, possibly even salvation. And if I said no, if I didn't conform, I was convinced that I would face rejection, abandonment, and a lonely, wretched death. The stakes seemed high. Too high to risk on the possibility of a radio career. I didn't have the courage or the imagination to do anything different than what was laid out in front of me. And I wasn't surrounded by risk takers. Lovely people, but not risk takers. Most of the people I knew wanted to fit in, and they were encouraging me to do the same. Plus, radio seemed like fun, and fun never seemed like an option. Nowhere on this declaration of conformity is the word fun mentioned. Lucky for me, somebody invented podcasting, and now I'm getting a second chance. Now, you may think, with 4 million podcasts in the world, why do we need another one? Well, there are nearly 160 million books in the world, and I, for one, get excited whenever another one's on offer. There's no way to know how many songs there are, but people take a stab at 300 million. Some say there are billions of songs, and who doesn't want more music? And there are approximately 500,000 movies to view, and that doesn't include short films. Podcasting is just another medium that people are using to express themselves, get ideas across, move people, tell stories. And as some of you know, I'm a storyteller at heart. But podcasting is first and foremost about the listener. What a podcaster does is create audio experiences that accompany listeners through their life. And what makes podcasts unique is the intimacy. The podcast medium fosters an even more intimate connection than radio, which at one point was thought of as the ultimate intimate medium. It's the one that one-on-one connection with the host and the DJ and the listener. There's a man named Eric Newsom. He's a podcasting pioneer, and he wrote a book called Make Noise. And he says there's two reasons for the intimacy of podcast. First of all, almost all podcasts are consumed through headphones and earbuds. You're literally sticking earbuds in your ears. And it's a very physical and really emotionally intimate experience. And secondly, when someone listens to a podcast, it's purposeful. They don't just want to hear a random country music station like they could on a radio, and then when they get tired, change the channel for classic rock. There's an active listening. They're intentional with what they select, and they're looking for a really specific experience. And listeners want to hear a small part of themselves being nurtured and nourished by what podcasters do. As Newsom goes on to say, a great podcast lingers and resonates far after you finish listening. It has altered you in some way. Now, I've only been creating this podcast for the past 3 years. We've just completed season 4. But it's clear that my podcast has been in the works well before podcasts were even invented. And when I look back, I can see these moments in my life were leading to my producing an audio experience around creativity and courage, starting with when I said no to the demo reel offer. For about 10 more years, I stuck with the public relations and communications career, billing my time in 15-minute increments, working for clients like retail banking, traffic reporting, hazardous waste recycling, nothing that really blew my skirt up, until eventually I snapped. And what snapping looked like for me is I left a lucrative full-time job, started consulting, and I went to art school part-time. And after 3 years in art school, I realized that I wanted to dedicate myself to my artwork. And I also realized that if I do this communication job for one more minute, I'm going to die. Slowly, but I'm going to die. And the problem was I had created a life for myself in Boston that required a high-paying consulting gig that I didn't want anymore. I was getting these internal marching orders that I needed to uproot myself and put myself in a completely new environment. So my plan was to suspend my consulting practice and move to the west of Ireland, where I'd recently taken a 3-week watercolor class. I thought I'd need about 6 months to start making this transition from consultant to full-time artist. And my friends hear my plans, and they start voicing their fears for me pretty loudly. They say, but the fear is, and what we're afraid of. And I kind of start to waver a bit. But a priest at my church tells me, Tricia, everyone will tell you the cost of going, but no one will tell you the cost of staying. After that conversation, I was out of there. And 1 week, I quit my job, sell my car, get rid of my apartment, divorce my husband. This was not a whim. We've been separated for more than 2 years. I cash out my retirement account and I moved to Ireland. And I am the happiest I have ever been in my life. I'm writing, I'm painting, I start dating a man 7 years younger than me with a ponytail. You may know him as my bird-watching, hawk-tracking husband, Eric Masterson. And if you want to know more about him, listen to season 3, the special bonus episode. And when I leave my corporate career to become an artist, I know I'm onto something because my soul isn't being crushed anymore. Instead of 6 months, I stay in Ireland for 4 years. I keep making art and writing. I marry Eric, and eventually we decide to move to the United States, and we end up in New Hampshire. And I spend more than a decade as a visual artist, and I'm most often creating works on paper or of paper. And then the market crashes, and no one buys visual work, and no one hires consultants either, which at that point I'd forgotten how to do anyway. And I thought, I know, I'll go into performance because that's so lucrative. It made no sense, and I was terrified, but ever since I went to Ireland, those internal marching orders were kicking in again, and I felt compelled to write this one-woman show, which had nagged at me for more than a decade, right after I did a small performance at art school. And so for about 5 years, I practiced monologues in secret to the dashboard in my car. I write vignettes out in longhand in a journal that I hid. The only person that I talked to about this is Eric. And then one day, we're walking the dog, and I'm going on about this imagined show. And Eric stops me and says, oops, there's a picture of me as an artist in Ireland. How about that? And then Eric stops me and he says, Tricia, stop talking about the show and do it. You've got to do the show. So as it turns out, I had a solo exhibition of my visual work coming up at the former Redmond Bennett Gallery in Dublin. I don't know if you remember that gallery. It was a beautiful space. And I was expected to give an artist talk, like I used graphite on stonechin paper, something like that. But instead, I asked the gallery owners, Laura and Bonnie, if I could do a performance piece, which of course was not yet written, and I had absolutely no idea how to do. And they took a chance and they said yes. So I had a date, had a venue, and fingers crossed, an audience. Now I just needed to write the show, which again, I had no idea how to do. But I had help from Kathy Manfrey and Nancy Knowles and Christina Trump and Dan Herlin, who's been on this stage at least twice and appears on season 1, episode 7. Listen to that podcast. This community of artists all came together to help me develop and deliver this piece, which after many revisions, eventually went on to win an award at New York's International Fringe Festival. Now, some of you may have seen the show. It was originally called I Will Be Good, and then was renamed How to Draw Nekkid Man, where I talk about how I left my corporate marketing career to become an artist. And the risk of doing that one-woman show pays off because it lands me on the Moth stage. Now, if you're not familiar with the Moth, it's an organization dedicated to the art and craft of storytelling. My neighbors, the amazing authors Cy Montgomery and Howard Mansfield, season 3, episode 8, introduced me to it. They said it'd be fun and maybe I could get some exposure for the show. So back in December 2010, Eric and I drive down to New York the day after Christmas, right before a blizzard hits, so I can attend a story slam at the bitter end in the Village. I put my name in a hat, my name is called, I get up on stage and tell a story in front of 300 people I'd never seen before in my life about going to art school and drawing from a nude model for the first time. It ranks as one of the biggest thrills in my life. I didn't win the slam, but I fell in love with storytelling. And the Moth loves the story and asked me to come down to New York and tell a longer version of their story on the main stage. So 5 months later, I hop in my Suzuki wagon, I drive down I-91 from New Hampshire to New York, convinced that I'm going to tell the best story ever. It was this train wreck of arrogance and naivete. I walk into the rehearsal spaces at the Moth offices. It's this small room separated by this huge, thick curtain. It was purple. It was like 15 feet high. And I meet my fellow storytellers. There's 4 of them. And one of them is an international scientist who tells a story about studying the jumping spider in Sri Lanka during a coup while corpses are floating down the river. There's the recovering addict who'd been in a shipwreck and had to drink his own urine to survive. The other 2 stories are just as extreme, about racial injustice and family dysfunction. And I went to art school. And I am mortified. and after rehearsal, I go straight to the artistic director's office, the fabulous Catherine Burns, season 1, episode 3, and say, "You have made a horrible mistake. I have no business being on this stage. All I did was go to art school." And she says, "Tricia, first of all, do you think we would put you on that stage if you weren't ready? And secondly, not all stories are extreme, but they need to be told." That's some of the best direction and encouragement I have ever received, and I pass it on to you. I have based my career on telling small moment stories and helping other people tell theirs. Screw up your courage, tell your story no matter how insignificant you think it is. So the Moth airs the story on their podcast, and nearly 250,000 people download the episode. Now, I think I'm a pretty good storyteller, but what people were resonating with was what that story was about, stepping into our creative selves. People start writing to me, asking me how they could leave their jobs that were crushing their souls, or maybe just how to take a painting class. I actually had a young woman call me who was in her 4th year of a 5-year PhD MD program who wanted to leave university and be an oil painter in Santa Fe. And I could relate. I was raised to follow that safe and predictable path, but that path made me miserable. And I kept looking for other ways to lead my life, a blueprint for how to do things differently. And all these other people wanted the same thing. And that's when the idea for my podcast began to germinate, even though I didn't know it was going to be a podcast at the time. I thought it was going to be a memoir. So telling stories with the Moth was like learning at the feet of the masters. And I learned the 3 key elements of storytelling, which you may know: theme, stakes, and narrative arc. I run every podcast episode, every season, and even my life by these elements. The theme of this story is from conformity to courage, and if I'm doing this correctly, every detail I'm including in this story underscores that theme. I'm using it as my editing tool. It helps me decide what to put in and what to leave out. So I'm constantly moving the story and that theme forward with every episode and every season and every choice I make in my life. And I'm asking myself, am I moving the story forward? And stakes, of course, is key. If there are no stakes, there's no story. I mean, what can be won? What can be lost? And what's at stake for me, and maybe for my listeners, and maybe for some of you in the audience, is my soul. And whether or not I will regret the work I might have done instead of stepping out of my comfort zone and feeling the joy that comes from doing it, and making the impact that I can have on the world around me. Art school taught me that the declaration of conformity is backwards. That my approval and my community, and yes, my salvation, comes by taking creative risk, not following a predictable path. That the riskiest thing that I can do, perhaps any of us can do, is play it safe. Because by playing it safe, we reject our dreams, abandon adventures, and tempt dying that lonely, wretched death. So those are high stakes. A narrative arc, you know who I was at the beginning of the story, and in a little bit you'll know who I am at the end, but I can guarantee you I am a constant work in progress. But even with my success with the Moth and the popularity of How to Draw a Nekkid Man, I still struggle on stage. Because if you recall that declaration of conformity, I was raised never to draw attention to myself. And throughout my life, I've been told that my big personality was not an asset. It was a liability. I'm not supposed to take up space. And so I'm conflicted. Performing completely energizes me, and audiences respond well, but every time before I go on stage and even afterwards, those old tapes would play in my head that a lady doesn't draw attention to herself. And I sit in the green room and I beat myself up for not hiding this big personality. And I think somehow this is going to cost me. Then one day, I'm backstage at the Moth's sold-out main stage show in Somerville. I'm one of 5 storytellers. I'm sort of pacing back and forth, wondering who I think I am to be doing this at all. And then the director approaches me and she says, "Hey, Tricia, we need you to open the show. I realize that's a tough spot, but you have that big personality, and we know you can fill up the space. Her encouragement felt like an anointing, like I was seen for the first time. My story career launches at that moment, and I have not looked back. So I start telling stories and teaching with the Moth, which I still do, and I do it for several years. And it leads to a sensible and lucrative gig with a marketing company out of Nashville, teaching storytelling to businesses, which I did for 4 years. And right before COVID hit, it's February 2020, and I'm in Algoma, Wisconsin, at the height of winter, at a roadside motel, not hotel, motel with an M, with that scary disinfectant smell. And I'm in Algoma to teach precision machinists how to use story in their customer messaging. I'm sitting on the side of the bed and I'm looking to see if it takes those quarters to activate the magic fingers massage function. That's how old this room is. And I'm starting to feel that if I do this work for much longer, I'm gonna die. And I think, okay, wait, I have been here before. So for several years before my Algoma moment, there were two thoughts that were running through my head. First, I felt compelled to read about Joan of Arc, though I never did read about her. And second, I'd been working on a memoir. And at one point I was thinking, should I be writing a memoir or a manifesto? I didn't really know what a manifesto was, but I thought I should be writing one. So I hire a creative coach to give me some direction. And he says, well, Tricia, in your wildest dreams, what do you want to do? And I thought, I'm paying this guy a chunk of change, so I might as well go all in. And I said, I have this big personality, and I'm incredibly vocal about creativity and how it's transformed my life. And my Moth story motivated a lot of people to change their lives. So it sounds crazy, but I feel like I'm supposed to lead some kind of movement. I don't even know what that means when I say it. And he says, well, Tricia, I think you need to go read a book by somebody who led their own movement. I think you need to read about Joan of Arc. And my jaw drops a little. And then he goes, and while you're at it, why don't you write a manifesto? I was like, are you kidding me? So I did what he said, and I decided to spark the No Time to Be Timid movement, which you are now all a part of. And pulling from all of that encouragement I received over the years, I wrote the No Time to Be Timid manifesto. But I didn't know what to do with it. I've been kicking around the idea for a podcast for years, but I couldn't get any traction with any kind of idea. And then in February 2022, right after I'd written the manifesto, the Moth called and said they wanted to air one of my stories on the Moth radio hour in 3 months. It was a story I told in 2014, I'd almost forgotten about it, about how when my first husband, not Eric, my first husband and I separated, I'd accidentally moved across the street from the woman he was having an affair with. That's a true story, which was tragic at the time, but really funny now. And you know what made that funny? 15 years. 15 years. As they say in my line of work, tragedy plus time equals comedy. At any rate, in the story, I talk about how making art helped me get through that trauma and how art saved my life, which is the theme of most of my stories. So I said, that'd be great if you aired that story, but you know how you read a storyteller's bio at the end? And they said, yeah. I said, would you mind saying that Tricia Rose Burt is the host of the popular new podcast, No Time to Be Timid? And they said, sure. Now, to be clear, I didn't own a microphone. I hadn't even taken a class. I didn't have the first idea how to produce a podcast. But I was not going to miss that opportunity of more than 2 million people hearing about my podcast on the Moth Radio Hour, even if it wasn't made yet. So like the first time I performed my performance piece, I had a goal and a deadline that there was no way out of. That bio was going on air. Now I just needed to create the show in 3 months. I took a class. I bought a book. I tried to get as smart as I could by diving into this medium I knew nothing about. And they ask important questions like, who are you? What's the expertise or passion that you're bringing to the show? Who is your listener? What do you have to say? And what effect do you want to have on them after they've listened to your show? And I knew that the story I told more than a decade ago on the Moth stage about finding the courage to step into a creative life wasn't just my story, it was my mission. And I wanted to help aspiring and practicing artists and writers and entrepreneurs find the courage to make their creative work, to offer the encouragement that I'd received from my priest and my husband and fellow artists and several directors along the way at just the right time, to do the work I was called to do instead of just talking about it. I wanted to give them a blueprint for what a creative life could look like. And over the years, I developed a vast network of creatives, some well-known, all major talents, who have taken significant risk. I thought I'll showcase those artists, many of them from the Monadnock region, and I'll give them a platform to tell their stories because as Henry Matisse says, committing to a creative life, often, which means saying no to practical choices and stepping into the unknown, it takes a lot of courage. And I wanted my guest courage to rub off on my listeners and me. I wanted to rub off on me. There was another thing that they stressed, which was sustainability. How can you sustain a podcast financially? How can you sustain it from a content standpoint? But most importantly, how can you sustain it energetically? As artists and writers and entrepreneurs and leaders, we have to ask that question all the time. How can we sustain it? So I thought, I won't launch a weekly podcast. I'll produce one season, see if I even like making a podcast. And I thought I'll use the manifesto as my framework. It has 10 principles, so I'll produce 10 episodes, drop them every other week, with 10 guests to exemplify each one. Now, this is a manifesto that works for me, and you're welcome to adopt it. You may want to craft your own manifesto. But right now, we're going to review each of the principles of mine, and I want you to think of which principles resonate with you and what principles you might want to add to it. And if you're like me, you'll like this way better than the Declaration of Conformity. So the first principle of the manifesto is the riskiest thing you can do is play it safe. It's my own personal mantra, and for good reason. My life is littered with instances where I said yes because I thought that would make me secure, and then more often than not, things exploded instead, like my first marriage or my job as a corporate communications director. But there's also times I said no to things, good things, because they were going to push me out of my comfort zone, like the radio story I told you in the beginning. So if somebody offers you the chance to do something you've never tried before and that makes you a little nervous, say yes. You don't know what that may lead to. The second principle of the manifesto is there is more than one right way in life. I interviewed Liz and Matt Meyer-Bolton of the SALT Project in Keene. They are in the back of the audience. Hello, Liz and Matt. Season 1, Episode 2. They're ordained ministers, both raised by ministers, but now they're award-winning filmmakers and podcasters. Instead of saying, we're going to be pastors for the rest of forever because this is what we do, they transferred their skill sets to a different medium. Filmmaking started as a side hustle while they were in traditional ministry, but then it became their focus. And when I interviewed them, Matt had just finished up a podcast series on Vincent van Gogh and the season of Lent. And as he said, it's basically the same muscles as preaching. It's just done in the podcast format. What continues to define their work is finding things that are unseen or not seen enough and bringing them out into the light. So it's a similar set of gifts and talents, but used in a different set of media. So think about how you might be able to expand how you use your gifts and use them in a different way. The third principle of the manifesto is don't expect a linear path. I just interviewed an author named S.C. Perot, Season 4, Episode 9, who wrote the book Styles of Joy. Now, the pandemic helped her realize that she loved everything about being a corporate lawyer, her coworkers, her clients, except writing contracts, which is what she was hired to do. So she left her career, and then she went through a difficult divorce. Afterwards, she just experienced this tidal wave of loss. She found solace in walking, and while she walked, she listened to the good energy music of the pop star Harry Styles. And before she knew it, she was seeing 17 Harry Styles concerts across 5 countries in 10 months. SC not only transformed from a Stanford-educated, rule-following corporate lawyer into a bedazzled, boa-wearing fangirl dancing in a mosh pit with complete strangers, but she also rediscovered her joy and her creativity in the process. She's now an author, an instructor in human and organizational development, and a thought leader in the transformational power of joy. Sometimes the straightest route is a crooked line. The 4th principle of the manifesto is creativity is not a frivolous pursuit. When I worked as a corporate communication consultant, I was a consultant conveyor belt. I just kept shooting out the same solution over and over again. And that all changed when I went to art school. Right at the beginning, our instructors gave us a large, thick sheet of paper and told us to work on that same piece of paper for 10 minutes every day for the next 10 weeks. They didn't tell us what to do with that piece of paper. We had to decide for ourselves. I pin my sheet of paper on the wall, then I stare at it, panic, and start to cry. I cried a lot in art school. And my teacher sees me in distress and she says, "Tricia, just ask yourself, what happens if I do this? And then make a mark and see what happens." And so I make a tiny mark, and I survived. So I made another mark, and over the course of the class, I made all kinds of marks with different mediums I'd never used before. And every day, my painting transformed into something more interesting. So now I try to ask myself, what happens if I do this? In my creative work and in my professional work, and I can tell you my clients can tell the difference. Practicing creativity opens your mind to ideas and solutions you never considered before. And there's another reason why creativity isn't frivolous. It actually affects your health. My creative coach, Mark McGinnis, season 1, episode 4, who's also a therapist, says, "One thing I've discovered is I actually get physically ill if I try to neglect or avoid or put off my creativity." And I've seen all kinds of versions of that in my therapy practice. At a certain level, you can't deny the creative person that you are. The 5th principle of the manifesto is logic can work against you. One of my favorite interviews with a comedy writer named Steve Young, season 2, episode 8. He was a writer for David Letterman for 25 years, and he wrote the bit Dave's Record Collection. Anybody see David's Record Collection? And when he was doing that, he accidentally discovered the little-known world of industrial musicals. And when he was searching for records in flea markets and stores, he found these albums stamped not for commercial sale, and found out like huge companies like Westinghouse and Hardee's and John Deere would commission Broadway-style musicals, sometimes with budgets of millions, about their product lines that would be performed only one time at national sales conventions, and they were recorded on these albums. Steve amassed this huge record collection, which led him to write a book and then be the subject of the award-winning documentary Bathtubs Over Broadway. And the film, Steve says, life can be so rich and wonderful when we step off the logical path and embark on eccentric adventures. And if you haven't seen his documentary, I urge you to do so. The 6th principle of the manifesto is practicality is overrated. My dear friend Rachel Perry, season 1, episode 6, decided to go to art school at 36 while she was raising a first grader. Not exactly practical. Sometimes she'd sketch with one hand and drive with the other while she was taking her son to school. She's now a nationally known artist. She's been a fellow at MacDowell at least 4 times, and last year she was part of a theatrical experience at Carnegie Hall. Sometimes it pays to put practicality aside and just go for it. The 7th principle of the manifesto is constraints or opportunities. All the good artwork I ever made came from a financial constraint. When I was living in Ireland, I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any money for oil paint. So I worked with other people's, I can't believe I did this. I worked with other people's used tea bags from a coffee shop. This was way before COVID, and apparently I was unconcerned about my health. But a few of those pieces are now in some prestigious corporate art collections. The financial constraint pushed me to creatively problem solve. Twyla Tharp, the choreographer, tells a wonderful story about how she made her worst work when she had no deadline and unlimited cash. She needed parameters of time and budget to work against. And here's what I didn't know about Grandma Moses. She produced over 1,000 paintings in the last 3 years of her life, but only after her arthritis made it impossible for her to crochet. She worked with this constraint. She couldn't do crochet anymore, so she started painting. And at the age of 80, she was featured on the cover of Time magazine. What we think is a limitation may be the thing that ignites our creative thinking. The 8th principle is failure is your friend. When my memoir didn't get picked up, I called my friend Amy Grant, season 2, episode 1. She's a Grammy Award-winning musician who's been around the block a couple times. And she said, Tricia, in our house, a no is as good as a yes, because it just redirects you. Which completely removes the rejection component. If you say my creativity is going to end up looking like this, then the only result is it either looked like that or it didn't. It's a pass or fail. And so creativity requires no's, because then you go, oh, okay, well, we won't continue in that direction. We'll keep going, but we'll go in a different direction. And then it all just becomes exploration and adventure. So if you get a no, don't be discouraged. A no can be helpful. And I find eventually a yes will come. Plus, you just repurpose the material. A lot of my memoir has ended up in my podcast. The 9th principle of the manifesto is there is courage in community. It helps to have fellow pilgrims on a journey. Everything is easier when you have someone to cheer you on. And this season, one of my guests was the #1 hit songwriter, Barry Dean. He's written for folks like Little Big Town and Tim McGraw. And he's also the CEO of a company that makes smart technology for wheelchairs because his daughter's in one. And if you only listen to one of my podcast episodes, listen to that one. It's season 4, episode 8. And in it, Barry talks about the impact one of his colleagues, Chris, had on him and on his songwriting career. Barry told Chris, there's a whole lot of voices in my head telling me I can't. And the one that says I can sounds like you. That's what we hope we can do with this podcast. Be the voice in your heads that say you can. Now, the 10th principle of the manifesto is make a mark now. Just like my art instructor told me, make a mark and see what happens. Creativity matters no matter when you start. I went to art school in my mid-30s, got on stage when I was 50, and I started a podcast at 62. I have no idea what's going to happen when I turn 70, but it's probably already in the works. And I'm in good company. Julia Child mastered the art of French cooking when she was 49. Laura Ingalls Wilder published Little House in the Big Woods, her first book in that series, when she was 64. And speaking of 64, this season I featured 3 women on my podcast, episode 4, season 6, who are doing incredible things. They're also 64. And one of them happens to be Jaffrey resident Amy Myers, who started her business, Mrs. Myers Etiquette, and has nearly 90,000 followers on Instagram. Yay for Amy. Listen to the episode and check her out. A dear friend of mine who's working in Haiti for years, and she told me about a man named Coley Gorham who first visited Haiti in 1998 when he was 80. For the next 20 years, he and his wife empowered young Haitians through education, raising money, and endless visits, not stopping until he was 100 years old. My personal hero is Iris Apfel, the fabric designer turned fashion icon in her 90s. So whatever your dream, it's not too late. And to help you along, I have copies of the manifesto for everyone. My husband, Eric, and Amy Myers will be passing them out as you exit, posting them in your home, adopt it as your own. Last year, we completed season 3, and we received a Signal Award, which is a prestigious podcast industry honor in the arts and culture category that included, get this, Oprah Winfrey. I will never tire of saying that my little production company, I Will Be Good Productions, which consists of me, who has the good sense to work with Adam Arnone, was in the same category as Oprah Winfrey. She got gold, we got silver, and we were thrilled. But I will tell you that podcasting takes an enormous amount of work. Of those 4 million podcasts I mentioned at the start, many are dormant. Only about 32% of them have produced 10 or more episodes, and only 4% are consistently creating content. There's a real thing called pod fade. People start a podcast and then realize how hard it is to make a good show, and they just abandon the project. On my end, it takes 3 to 4 days for each 45-minute episode, and that doesn't include the heroic efforts of Adam, who worked so hard to make each episode sound flawless. And the show wouldn't be possible without support of my executive producers, Amy Grant, Nancy Perot, and Sage Wheeler, as well as those who contribute to my factured Atlas fiscal sponsorship. And unlike a live audience with a podcast, you don't get immediate feedback. It can be a grind. And sometimes it just feels like we're putting stuff out into the air. Unless a listener reviews the show or sends you an email, you don't know if you're making an impact. A few weeks ago, I was pretty low. I was exhausted by season 4 and telling my husband I wasn't sure whether it was worth all the effort. I opened my emails and there was one waiting for me from a listener, and she wrote, "Thank you for the impact that your podcast has had on me. Your manifesto made so much sense to me. It was a call to arms. I am a South African living in Spain with a day job in marketing and a relentless dream to write children's books. Each episode has given me some form of creative input and encouragement. The one with Nora Pfeiffer changed things for me in a significant way. As someone with a full-time job and 2 kids, I envied her ability to work within her child-rearing constraints and not to wait for the perfect conditions. That triggered a conversation with my husband about carving out time for me, and since January this year, I've enjoyed 4 precious hours every Saturday to be completely creative. I have completed an online course by children's book author Julia Donaldson. I have finished a new story, started a Substack, started another story, plucked up the courage to read my story to 200 kids at my children's school, wrote a cover letter for literary agents, and started to reach out to a long list of them. I finally feel like I'm wielding my talent and my passion. Anyway, thank you, Tricia, for having the audacity to draw a Nekkid Man all the way to doing this podcast. It's meant and means so much to me." That listener became the voice in my head that says I can. So there will be a season 5. It launches next spring, maybe earlier, and the manifesto will still be central to our efforts. We're going to keep having conversations about creativity and courage, which we all need now more than ever. And I hope you'll tune in, listen to past episodes because they're great, do the work you're called to do, and remember, let's say it all together like we did in the beginning and say it like you mean it. This is no time to be timid. Thank you very much. Thank you. Does anyone have questions for me? It's okay if I should have planted it. Adam, ask me a question. You work with me every day on this podcast. Why are we still doing the podcast? I'm just kidding you. You know, do you have one? Yeah, I thought you raised your hand. Oh, Amy Myers has one.
Tell us a little bit, I know you also have a side hustle doing corporate work and helping corporate people find their voice.
I do. I have a side hustle. Every artist has a side hustle. We're all about side hustles. I do help, I have worked with nuns to private equity folks, helping them tell their story. And it's weird, for the longest I've had the no time to be timid thing over here and the corporate stuff over here, and they're starting to integrate, which is kind of an interesting thing that's happening. I gave the manifesto to a corporate client of mine. She's like, it's in my office. I'm like, okay. So that's exciting to blend the two. Yes, sir?
What's the one question that you wish people would ask you, but no one ever asks you?
Well, I always ask them one question at the end of I have one question I ask them, which is, what do you need courage for right now? And that's always the most fascinating answer, is to see what they have to say. And one of the things I try to do, we were talking about this a little bit at the dinner beforehand, is I research my subjects a lot. And I try to ask them questions that no one has asked them before. And whenever one of my guests says, no one's never asked me that, I'm like, score. Because they don't want to be talking about stuff they always talk about in any other interview. So I just try to dig and see, what can we talk about? Make it a conversation. Did you have a question?
I was faced once with trying to create not to be timid. But my question is this: in that instant, I realized I don't feel like I have a creative soul, but I have a different talent of putting people together and creating something new out of synergy in a situation that takes collaborative work. I work better with people, but they don't always have the courage to come out and try to work with that person or introduce this new crazy idea that we should all put together. So I'm wondering, in your podcast or wherever, there are a lot of people like us that don't feel particularly like we can create a story or write a new book or do something. But what about those people who have a different way of using their talents but need the courage to somehow get it out there and just take these risks?
So one of the things that she was asking is about, she's not necessarily an artist. She's not making something tangible, like a book or painting, something like that. But she's creating community, and she's creating collaboration, and she's creating synergy between different parties. Is that right?
Yeah, basically that's right. In a higher, big area, she sees the vision of something that should be made, should happen.
Oh, yes. Well, and this sounds so great. You have to just do it. There is no time to be timid. Like, if you have a good idea, you have no idea what that may launch. You have no idea how many people will be touched by that. I had no idea there's some woman South African woman in Spain that's suddenly doing all this crazy work because she heard this podcast. I had no idea. So you have to go on some level of faith. Worst thing that can happen is somebody says no, and just make it. You just get the momentum and do it. I used to be timid at first, and now I will ask anybody to be on my podcast. I'm just like, hello, excuse me, we don't know each other. You want to be on my show? You just do it. You'd be amazed at how many people want to come on board with you.
Well, if I could just add to that. So when I was in this situation, I actually asked a question of somebody who was in a very good position like yourself, of giving advice. And I said, I'm afraid to point out this situation with a particular big person in business, a man that I just heard. And she said, I know you can do it. So my point is, before a lot of audience, this person said, I know you can do it. If you share your idea with one person, like, and you shared your podcast with this woman, and they say, yes, and you can get the encouragement.
Yes.
You can overcome your fear just by starting with one person and going from there.
Yeah. What she's saying is that you can get, if you just share it with one person and that one person hears it and receives it, you can get the courage you need to keep going. Yeah. Just don't keep it to yourself. And it may end up in something different than you started out, but that's okay. You just get it out there. Yeah.
What made you move to New Hampshire from Ireland? And what of New Hampshire inspires your creativity?
Okay, so that's just a whole nother Amos Fortune talk. And the quickest thing, we were in Dublin. Eric was birding in the west of Ireland. He heard someone say, hey, are you a birder? And Eric said, yeah. Can you take me birding? Eric said, sure. turned out to be a guy named David Baum, if you know David Baum. Eric and I were trying to figure out, do we stay in Europe, do we move to the States? And David said, well, I think you ought to, if you're thinking of moving to the States, you ought to move to New Hampshire. And so Eric called me and said, I met this guy, he thinks we ought to move to New Hampshire. And I said, honey, no one lives in New Hampshire. I had lived in Boston for 6 years. I'm like, it's just a state. No, I don't know. Something about, he was like, no, he really thinks we ought to move. And so we did move here. And, we visited, and when we were visiting, we're in downtown Peterborough, or downtown, whatever, central Peterborough, and I hear this, hey, Tricia, and it was Amy Myers, who was a dear friend of mine in Boston. She had just moved to Jaffrey, was wandering the streets looking for a friend, and I showed up. So I had this built-in best friend, here we were, right? And what is my creativity in New Hampshire? I have to be honest, I struggle sometimes with New Hampshire because it's quiet. And I'm in the woods. And one of the reasons why I did this podcast was I'm in the woods in New Hampshire, and I need to talk to more people. Truly. In 1 year, my memoir didn't get picked up. I lost all my work because of COVID. Eric flew into a mountain. I turned 60, and I'm like, we got to do a reboot here. And so I know I'll do this podcast. And so I could be relevant. I could still be relevant and talk to people. So New Hampshire is great because I have a 1,400 square foot studio, which I couldn't have anywhere else, and I have downtime to be able to make things. I will often leave New Hampshire to get inspiration other places, and then come back and make the work here. It's it's kind of a balance. Yes. Are there podcasts that inspire me? I just love Julie Louise-Dreyfus. I just could listen to that. It's just brilliant. Wiser Than Me, if you haven't heard, it's a wonderful podcast. And so one of the reasons why I also started this podcast, because I was hearing another podcast where it was very snazzy artists, and then after I went to here, and they're just so accomplished. It was I was like, I'm just depressed. I'm never going to be that person. So I wanted to have artists that were regular, major talents, not household names, and talk about, I won't have the star of Orange Is the New Black. I'll have one of the writers on it, Hillary Graham, if you hear. I have these sometimes people who are behind the scenes more, or because I don't want to intimidate people. I want it to make it be like it's accessible. We can all be doing this, right? Anyway, there you go. Hello. Okay. There you go. Don't forget your manifestos at the door. It is so hot. It's so hot. Oh.
So, I really shouldn't have to have notes for this, but we love you, and it's our forum tradition that our thanks comes with maple syrup.
I think we just finished the one you gave Eric 10 years ago when he spoke. But thank you so much. I'm so excited. Thank you.
So just a reminder, please come on over to the reception, share some treats, and talk with Tricia. So with that, the forum is officially closed for the evening.